Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're watching NDTV. Bhanumati ka kunba joda and then ekla chalo re. This is how Prime Minister Narendra Modi described the opposition's flailing attempts to strike a united front against him for the 2024 Lok Sabha election. In a fierce attack on the opposition, the Prime Minister, speaking in the Parliament today, blamed the Congress for not even recognizing talent among its own, not believing in the people of India, being entitled but directionless, and also for holding the country back. He also said his third term will see big decisions, big reforms. Now, the Prime Minister has said many of these things before, but the timing of today's speech and the occasion makes it all the more important. It is the last session of the Parliament before the big Lok Sabha elections of 2024. Even as the party makes it clear that both Mandal and Kamandal, which is basically social justice and Hindu consolidation, are equally important to its outreach, with the Bharat Ratna being conferred on BJP leader L.K. Advani and former Bihar Chief Minister and OBC leader Karpuri Thakur. There has also been a generous emphasis on welfare when it comes to the Prime Minister's approach, and that his speech reflected today. Now, the opposition throughout this week has blamed the centre for alleged misuse of investigating agencies, but the Prime Minister today centred his speech around highlights of its governance, the laws and policies he came up with, and how they impacted people. Coming just days after the interim budget was presented, a budget that saw no SOPs that were expected in an election year, the Prime Minister's speech in many ways outlined the campaign of the BJP and his own model of guarantees. So is the PM signalling a change in election strategy, and in what ways? There was also a lot of emphasis on Yuva. How does that translate into an electoral outreach in a country that has among the highest proportion of working age population? We will try to make sense of the key takeaways from the Prime Minister's speech today in the Parliament with a panel of experts. But first, let's take a look at what the Prime Minister said today.
हम परिवारवाद की चर्चा वो करते हैं जो पार्टी परिवार चलाता है, जो पार्टी परिवार के लोगों को प्राथमिकता देती है, जो पार्टी के सारे निर्णय परिवार के लोग ही करते हैं, वो परिवारवाद है। न राजनाथ जी की कोई पॉलिटिकल पार्टी है, न अमित शाह की कोई पॉलिटिकल पार्टी है। और इसलिए जहां एक परिवार को पार्टियां लिखी जाती हैं, वो लोकतंत्र में उचित नहीं है। लोकतंत्र में पार्टी अनेक एक परिवार के 10 लोग राजनीति में आए, कुछ बुरा नहीं है। हम तो चाहते हैं नौजवान लोग आए। हम भी चाहते हैं ये इसकी चर्चा करिए। हमारे साथ, आपके साथ मेरा विषय नहीं है। देश के लोकतंत्र के लिए परिवारवादी राजनीति, पारिवारिक पार्टियों की राजनीति, ये हम सबकी चिंता का विषय होना चाहिए। एक ही प्रोडक्ट को बार बार लॉन्च करने का भरपूर प्रयास हो रहा है। आदरणीय अध्यक्ष जी, कांग्रेस एक परिवार में उलझ गई है। देश के करोड़ों परिवार की आकांक्षाएं और उपलब्धियां वो देख पा ही नहीं रहे, देख सकते नहीं, अपने परिवार के बाहर देखने की तैयारी नहीं है। और कांग्रेस में एक कैंसिल कल्चर डेवलप हुआ है। कुछ भी है कैंसिल, कुछ भी है कैंसिल। ये एक ऐसे कैंसिल कल्चर में कांग्रेस फंस गई है। अगर हम कहते हैं मेक इन इंडिया, तो कांग्रेस कहती है कैंसिल। हम कहते हैं आत्मनिर्भर भारत, कांग्रेस कहती है कैंसिल। हम कहते हैं वोकल फॉर लोकल, कांग्रेस कहती है कैंसिल। हम कहते हैं वंदे भारत ट्रेन, कांग्रेस कहती है कैंसिल। हम कहते हैं संसद की नई इमारत, कांग्रेस कहती है कैंसिल। यानी मैं हैरान हूं, ये कोई मोदी की उपलब्धियां नहीं है, देश की उपलब्धियां है। इन सारे 10 साल के कार्यकाल के अनुभव के आधार पर आज की मजबूत अर्थव्यवस्था को देखते हुए, जिस तेज गति से भारत विकास कर रहा है, उसकी बारीकियों को जानते हुए मैं विश्वास से कहता हूं, और इसीलिए मैंने कहा है कि हमारे तीसरे टर्म में भारत दुनिया की तीसरी बड़ी आर्थिक ताकत बनेगा। और ये मोदी की गारंटी है। ये कांग्रेस की सुस्त रफ्तार, कांग्रेस की सुस्त रफ्तार का कोई मुकाबला नहीं। आदरणीय अध्यक्ष जी, आदरणीय अध्यक्ष जी, शहरी गरीबों के लिए हमने गरीबों के लिए 400 घर हमने गरीबों के लिए, आदरणीय अध्यक्ष जी, हमने गरीबों के लिए 4 करोड़ घर बनाए। और शहरी गरीबों के लिए 80 लाख पक्के मकान शहरी गरीबों के लिए बने। कांग्रेस, अगर कांग्रेस की रफ्तार से घर बने होते तो क्या हुआ होता, मैं इसका हिसाब लगाता हूं। अगर कांग्रेस की जो रफ्तार थी उस प्रकार से चला होता तो 100 साल लगते, इतना काम करने में 100 साल लगते, 5 पीढ़ियां गुजर जाती। अब हमारी सरकार का तीसरा कार्यकाल भी बहुत दूर नहीं है। ज्यादा से ज्यादा 100-125 दिन बाकी है। और अब की बार पूरा देश कह रहा है, अब की बार खड़गे जी भी कह रहे हैं। लेकिन अध्यक्ष जी, मैं आमतौर पर ये आंकड़े के चक्कर में नहीं पड़ता, लेकिन मैं देख रहा हूं देश का मिजाज। एनडीए को तो 400 पार करवा ही के रहेगा, लेकिन भारतीय जनता पार्टी को 370 सीट अवश्य देगा। बीजेपी को 370 सीट और एनडीए को 400 पार।
So that was the Prime Minister speaking today in the Parliament. Let me bring in my guests here. Aditi Fadnis, senior journalist, Javed Ansari, also senior journalist, and Sajjan Kumar, who is an academic and researcher, join us today on this discussion. Thank you all of you for joining us on this broadcast. But first, let me go across to my colleague Himanshu, who tracks the Parliament for us. Himanshu, what was the mood like in the Parliament today in the Lok Sabha? Clearly, the Prime Minister touched upon a lot of areas, from, of course, attack on the opposition to Article 370 to welfare, and of course has said that 370 has set a target of 370 for the BJP alone and 400, more than 400 for the NDA. So, lot many points there to unpack. But what was the mood like in the Parliament today?
Well, it was expected that ahead of Lok Sabha elections, Prime Minister Modi, this is perhaps his second last speech in this Lok Sabha, because he's expected now to reply in Raj Sabha, and he will use this opportunity, of course, to outline his priorities, his vision of a Viksit Bharat, and there are hints of the kind of political campaign we will see BJP launch ahead of Lok Sabha elections. But if you see that the primary attack that Prime Minister carried out was against Congress, I think it was very scathing. He told Congress MPs that it seems to me that you are losing the will to even contest elections, and that's why many of you are now trying to find a road to reach somehow Rajya Sabha. He accused Congress of family politics, and he very categorically said that if there is one reason why opposition has become weak in India today, that is largely because of the weakening of the Congress party. And he said Congress is relying only on one product. It was an indirect attack on Rahul Gandhi, and that is one central reason why Congress is struggling to revive itself. And so this was a very, very scathing attack from Prime Minister, and he also outlined the achievements of his government in last 10 years, compared it with the status that was there between 2004 and 2014 when Congress led UPA was in power. So I think politically a very, very important speech, and there is a vision of a Viksit Bharat based on 4 pillars that he mentioned. First, of course, the Nari Shakti, Yuva Shakti. He talked about welfare and upliftment of poor and the farmers. And he said that there is a vision, there is a thinking on the basis of which we have worked. We will keep on working in the next 5 years as well. And he seemed to be, to me, a very, very confident Prime Minister ahead of the Lok Sabha elections.
Right.
And if you just look at the list of not only achievements that he counted and the fact that the strong words he used against Congress, and even at one time quipped that a leader like Mallikarjun Kharge is now no longer in Lok Sabha, he has now shifted to Raj Sabha. So I think he came well prepared and gave us enough hints of the kind of political campaign BJP is going to launch in run-up to the next Lok Sabha elections. Vasudha.
Himanshu, also tell us, when he started the speech, he did sort of in one ways lash out at Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary. He blamed him, not just blamed him, but he said that the Congress has been creating divisions, and that was quite a very interesting moment in the Lok Sabha today, because the Prime Minister directly attacked Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary, calling him Adhir Dada, and then basically telling him not to speak like he just spoke before the Prime Minister. Would you like to speak about that?
Can you repeat your question, please?
No, I was talking to you about how the Prime Minister lashed out at Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary today in the beginning of his speech and said that the Congress has been creating divisions throughout, its rule over the country, and specifically on Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary, because Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary did speak about Chinese incursions, and then he said a lot of things which probably the Prime Minister was not happy about, and some of them were not even true. So that lashing out of the Prime Minister on Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary was particularly interesting, right?
That's right, Vasudha. I think a very important point you raised, because this is what our Prime Minister had said in the very beginning of his speech. It seemed that he had come ready to respond to the allegations leveled allegations leveled by Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary with regard to foreign policy and economic policies and unemployment, etc. And he was very categorical. He said that Congress party has always pursued the politics of divisiveness. He was very, very specific. He has always said, when the moment we talk about Viksit Bharat, when we talk about the development of the country, Congress comes forward and it questions our policies and our vision and our thinking. So I think it's a very, very scathing attack, and it all started with an attack on Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary himself. And remember, he had a war of words today with FM as well, when he had talked about the welfare schemes and its implementation in West Bengal, the release of funds, etc. So I think Prime Minister had come very, very, very well prepared today, and that's why he started off with a scathing attack on Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary himself and accused the Congress of pursuing a politics of divisiveness.
Right. Thank you,
Vasudha.
Himanshu, for joining us with those details. Let me go across to my guest now. Aditi Phadnis, the Prime Minister today was expected to present a report card of his achievements, a blueprint of his vision, and of course respond to the opposition. But clearly he went beyond, spoke about Nehru, Indira Gandhi, dynasty, welfare, and of course presented a very confident picture of his performance while talking about the cancel culture of the Congress. What would you describe as the key highlights of the Prime Minister's speech today, ma'am?
Well, let's not lose our sense of perspective. In analyzing the Prime Minister's speech, we need to also go back to the things that previous governments had done. And I'm not only talking about the Congress government, which was in power ruling India for the longest time, but also Atal Bihari Vajpayee's government. He opted not to refer to a single decision that the Vajpayee government, which was an NDA government, had taken, which was a continuum of the things that the government is doing now. So I find it very surprising that while it's all very well to say the Congress suffers from a cancel culture, it's also as if the BJP does not really want to remember the past BJP government which has been in power. This is what struck me quite strongly, particularly in the context of J&K, where Vajpayee's tone was Jamhuriyat, Kashmiriyat, Insaniyat when he went to Kashmir. and made that fantastic speech.
Right.
So there has to be some sort of a continuum, and we should not lose sight of that. Roadways, the infrastructure development was started by the Congress government, but was given a massive fillip by the Vajpayee government. We should not forget that. Similarly, the housing program is not something that has been started from tabula rasa. It was already there, and there's no doubt that this government has done a lot to beef it up.
Right.
But and similarly on the digital ideas, I mean, at one time the Paytm founder was a blue-eyed boy of the government, and now look what is happening to Paytm. So all I'm saying is, let's not get carried away. I mean, it was a fantastic speech. It was difficult to pinpoint one single point which stood out. The speech as a whole was a very combative speech, setting the stage for the elections. But let's also not lose our sense of perspective.
Right. Javed Ansari, would you like to respond to that? Taking forward this point on continuum, which Madam said right now, of course, vis-a-vis this whole cancel culture, I was reminded of this comment that the Prime Minister made a few days back on the Pran Pratishtha Day, Ram se Rashtra, Dev se Desh. The Prime Minister had said this, making it clear that Ayodhya is not a settlement of a conflict, but the start of something bigger. In some ways, an inspiration to finish an unfinished work or task of making this country a developed one or whatever. Now, how do you look? How do you look at today's speech? Because clearly the BJP under Narendra Modi is uncompromising on ideology, but its expression of Hindutva definitely has changed, because today's focus seems to be so much on welfare, governance. Do you think that is a change in articulation or strategy?
Look, I'm very concerned and intrigued, and I'd like to know what is this unfinished agenda. Because Vajpayee spoke of Raj Dharma. His predecessor, the first BJP Prime Minister, spoke of Raj Dharma. The first BJP Prime Minister's lead motive was reconciliation. Does this unfinished agenda also mean, because since we are quoting from the speeches, different speeches that the PM has made, the Prime Minister also made a reference in one of his speeches to the fact that in Mathura, you will have unfettered access. And so what is going to happen does Mathura and Kashi also form a part of the unfinished agenda? I'm very concerned.
But sir, today he did not talk about those things, right? Today the focus was on welfare and governance.
Vasu, you in the course of your statement mentioned some issues which he didn't speak of today. And that's the reason why I am also talking of.
Okay. But with regard to today's speech, do you think there's a different signaling of how the campaign would look like in the days to come?
Well, it's going to be a no-holds-barred, unapologetic campaign. The Prime Minister is very good at providing a nice framework for everything. But let's not forget, at the end of the day, when it comes down to elections, it's a very different Prime Minister that you see. It's a very different Prime Minister, and the base underlining everything of the BJP's campaign is Hindutva, robust nationalism, Labharti schemes, then the kind of organizational and financial muscle that you bring to bear. So today in Parliament he said something else. I'd like to see how much of this he follows once the campaign gets underway.
Right. That's an important point. Sajan, Yuva, one thing that I noticed in the speech was this constant reference to Yuva. And I think BJP, of course, emphasizes a lot on core voters. But can we expect more youth-centric themes in the new pitch? And, how do you also look at this whole aspect of jobs that he talked about? Because, he's also trying to dispel this notion of jobless growth that the opposition has been claiming.
Yeah, certainly. If you look at more than the content, if you see very structure of this speech, he signaled two things. One, the shifts that the Indian politics has taken. So the grammar of politics has certainly changed. And in that, the opposition parties and the parties when he referred to Congress and some of the regional parties which is led by families are at the receiving end. This is one. Two, you also see, and this pertains to your question about the youths. There is a kind of his attempt is to bring a grand fusion. So you see Mandal and Kamandal, Karpuri Thakur, L.K. Advani, and it's just not just the two individuals, but also the kind of discourses that they signified, the attempt to create a fusion. Similarly, you see the kind of rural and urban and metropolitan. So that way, certainly, we are witnessing a confident Modi, and he also gives a reflection of Modi campaigning during 2014 rather than 2019, and that's wherein you see the wit, satire, assertion, aggression, and all sorts of a kind of a vision for a different India under him. So in that aspect, the category of youth is important because what he was signaling that when you try to see youths in certain identity categories, in certain regional categories, certain ethnic categories, what he is trying to fuse that when all the discourses that has divided the youth, say in 1990s or in late 80s, so be it Bahujan versus non-Bahujan discourse, Mandal versus Kamandal discourse, today he is talking about a grand unity.
Right.
And that is why this entire notion of identity, sectarian identity-based politics, certainly there are concerns which is reflected. But I mean, Modi is clear about bringing grand fusion, cultural politics with material politics, past, present, and the future. And then certainly you see Mandal and Kamandal, and that creates a very unified vision of a youth. That is the attempt.
Right.
How much will he succeed? That is there, but certainly the kind of confidence that he exhibited certainly gives us some clue, and we feel a bit sorry for the state of Congress and the leadership.
Aditi ma'am, the PM specifically spoke about OBC politics, and taking off from what Sajjan said, he also said that there were multiple attempts made by the Congress to dislodge governments of OBC chief ministers like Karpuri Thakur. Now, with Nitish Kumar on his side, is this also an attempt by the Prime Minister to blunt the social justice card or caste census promise of the opposition? And what does this say about the potency of issues like this, that the Prime Minister does talk about 4 castes, which is Garib, Yuva, Mahila, and Kisan, but at the same time, the BJP also has to talk about social justice and Karpuri Thakur to ensure that it doesn't lose out on that particular aspect.
So I was a bit amused because he did not speak too much about caste census, which has actually put the BJP in a bit of a cleft stick. He didn't really dwell on it. And I think the issue is also that people, I mean, what would the people who are listening to him, how would the speech sound to them? I'm pretty sure that people in Manipur will be deeply disappointed, as in elsewhere in the Northeast. I'm pretty sure people listening in Tamil Nadu will have few takeaways, apart from the fact that the speech was made in Hindi. In Kerala, there won't be too many people who will feel that all the things that the government is claiming apply to them. So, I mean, yeah, 370 seats, but 370 seats is, I think, quite conservative, right? It should have been 415, which is the maximum. 403 is the maximum that the Congress ever got. So, I guess, despite all the confidence and despite all the assertion, we'll have to wait for a while before we reach that figure.
Javed Ansari, when we speak about economy today, the Prime Minister did explain in detail how inflation has been kept under control despite global challenges. Do you think economy is this time, rather than unlike 2019, is a strong point of the government? Do you see the kind of inflation management that the government has done, because growth is also projected at 7%? Of course, there are concerns with regard to consumption, or for that matter, fiscal deficit. But clearly, inflation, price rise, those noises are not as stern as they used to be in 2019.
Look, much will depend once the election gets underway on the kind of rhetoric and what issues come into play. How much will the Prime Minister dwell on on these so-called achievements of his government, and how much will he and his party go back to their pet themes? So right now, I do not believe, especially in the Hindi heartland, that much of this will cut ice. Once it comes to the crux, people will largely vote, unfortunately, still vote, based on their identity affiliations, and rather than on so-called, on achievements both real or perceived.
Right. Sachin, in the last few days, we did see Mamata Banerjee saying that she will fight alone. We also saw Nitish Kumar coming back to the NDA fold. We see many opposition leaders under the scanner of investigating agencies. But do you think the opposition's own problems in the last few days could also have aggravated this attack by the Prime Minister? Because when he says alignment hi bigad gaya hai, of course that, there is a political messaging in that. But how do you read this?
Yeah, certainly if you see the crisis of contemporary Indian democracy, and opposition is much to blame, because opposition cannot keep on kind of invoking its own sad state of affairs to garner votes and states. It has to fight back. And then you see the party that could have become the anchor of uniting all the opposition and the kind of non-BJP-ism that was the plank. Now the top leader is someone who is always accustomed to going for a thrilling politics and is always escaping the mundane, boring politics. Mundane, boring politics is about the priority. At election time, you need to talk with the alliance partners. You need to go for the seat sharing and kind of, smoothen the rough edges that was there. That task was left to Kharge, whose resonance outside Karnataka is very weak. Two, you also see that most of the parties, and this is secularism has been a cover-up. If you see the RJD or Samajwadi Party, this has been a cover-up to hide most of the corruptions, and that is why these parties are facing a terminal decline outside their core vote bank, because the rest of the majority of OBCs, Dalits, etc. do not resonate with these parties. And that is why all these parties, the leaders have big egos, and therefore certainly the opposition own lack of chemistry and inability to move beyond the photo is certainly that has given Prime Minister and the BJP a further leverage to go upfront vis-a-vis the opposition. So certainly, the state of Indian democracy is as much about the vibrancy of opposition party. And for that, you cannot blame the BJP and the state machinery for its own leadership, and internal culture is also much to blame.
Right. Aditi ma'am, as somebody who's covered the party for long, there are many, people keep talking about 2004 and the mistakes that the BJP made in 2004. Clearly, there were lessons learned, and even in the Bharat Ratna to LK Advani, there was an attempt to show that the party is united and that family stands together and faces a challenge. How do you think 2004 has figured in the psyche of the BJP in the elections that followed, and how different is the BJP today under Narendra Modi vis-a-vis, say, 2004?
Oh, it's very different. It has, I wouldn't say it has changed beyond recognition, but it's a very different BJP. There's no doubt about that. I noticed something interesting in his speech, which was the reference to Parivarvad. He has honed the definition of Parivarvad. He is saying that two people from the same family does not mean Parivarvad. This is, I think, he's kind of redefining what family rule means. So this time, I'm not sure if Rajnath ji will get a ticket to fight from Lucknow. But because one reason could be his son is already an MLA. But I think it's quite important that he was saying that in certain cases, Parivarvad is not Parivarvad.
Right. That's very interesting. Last word from you, Javed Ansari. Like ma'am said, Parivarvad and of course Namdar, Kamdar remained very constant. Now, is this one tag that opposition has struggled to in some ways disassociate itself from, but the Prime Minister never misses an opportunity to harp on them. Now, he's saying that NDA is all set to cross 400 mark. Is this optimistic, or do you see more allies coming into the fold? What do you have to say about the targets that the Prime Minister has set for the NDA and also for the BJP as 370?
So 370 for the BJP and just 30 for the allies. I'd like to know what the allies have to say about this, that they'll win just 30. So he's limited them to 30, and he and his party will get a 370. Whether that happens or not, we will know. He's already set a target, and if they fall short of it, then the people will have questions for him as to what happened and why they fell short. As far as Parivarvad is go, Parivarvad is a fact of life as far as Indian politics goes. Congress party, of course, but then there are a lot of other parties, and Mr. Modi's party has never shied away from aligning with them. He's talking to the TDP. He has an understanding with YSR Congress. He had an alliance for the longest time with Shiv Sena. He had an alliance for the longest time with Akali Dal. So this is the thing, you whitewash everything when it comes to your own, and you selectively focus on shortcomings as far as the opposition is concerned. So there will be action against corruption. Nobody is against action, but we want uniformity. Don't just target people or weaponize the official machinery and target those opposed to you politically, but act even against the 16 or 18 odd people who have and who had cases against them, and suddenly the agencies have gone silent. The Prime Minister has never uttered a word about them. Nobody has anything against action being taken, but there has to be uniformity.
Right. Thank you, Javed Ansari. Thank you, Aditi ma'am, and thank you, Sajjan, for joining us on this broadcast. The Prime Minister today laid broad outline for the BJP's campaign for 2024, setting a target for 370 for the BJP alone.